So these are the notes for 1.7, and our goal is to try to figure out how to find the midpoint of a line segment and how to find its length. Now, if we're just laid out on a number line, like up here, and we want to know the middle of 9 and 8, you can almost just see it, or you could just walk equal steps until you get into the middle, and you would land right at 4 for the midpoint. But when we're on a diagonal, and we want to find the middle, maybe this is the point -2, 3, and this is the point 5, let's say 7. Then what we need to do is consider that we have coordinates in a coordinate plane. And you'll notice that this 4, we can get it by just adding the 2 up, 9 plus -1 to find how long it is, it's 10 units, and divide by 2. And when we do that, 8 units, we get 8 divided by 2, which puts us right at that 4. And really what we're doing is just averaging the two numbers. So to get in the middle of any two numbers, you average them. To get in the middle of 2 points in the coordinate plane where they're x and y, and we call it first x, first y, and second x and second y, you do the same thing. It's just that you have to average the x's and average the y's. So take a look over here. First, we're going to take a little graphical approach here. We're going to graph the point 7, 3, 7 to the right on the x-axis and 3 up on the y-axis. Then we're going to go 5 to the left. We're going to label this point A right here. We're going to go 5 to the left on the x-axis and 5 up on the y-axis. And we're going to label that point B. We have a line segment connecting the two, and I'm going to draw that. What you're going to be asked to do in Delta Math is make a segment. Then it's going to tell you to put it inside of a rectangle. You're going to drag and slide across on your screen to create a rectangle that it's in the box of. And your midpoint has to be right smack in the middle of that box, in the middle of the x's and in the middle of the y's. So it's 2 up, so I'd be, you know what I mean, this is 2 units, so I'd be 1 up. But anyway, you can just kind of see where it is when you put it in that box. It looks like it's at 4, it looks like it's at 1 to the right and 4 up. But we really don't want to do it that way and have to plot them all and put them in a box and try to eyeball it. So is there a better way to arrive at that? Well, the midpoint is the average of the two. So what we do is we just add the x's, divide by 2. Let's go do that. Here's my first x. Here is my second x. Here's my first y. Here's my second y. I'm going to average the x's by adding them up and dividing by 2. Let me grab my highlighter here real quick. So I'm going to take these x's, I'm going to add them up, 7 plus -5. So let's show our work right here. We have 7 plus a -5. We're going to divide it by 2. Then we're going to add up our y's, 3 and 5, and divide by 2. So 3 plus 5, and we'll divide by 2. I'm averaging the x's and averaging the y's. 7 plus a -5 is 2, right here. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 3 plus 5 is 8. 8 divided by 2 is 4. Notice I took the graph away, and I was able to use that midpoint formula to find the middle without graphing it. Now, what I think you should do is put this big sucker in a box because it's going to get on your note card. This is what we call the midpoint formula. We're just averaging the x's and averaging the y's. I want you to pause the video and find the midpoint of segment GH when G is at -1, 7, and H is at -5, -2. I first labeled these, my first x, my first y, my second x, my second y. And then follow this formula. We do x plus x, -1 plus -5. We divide it by 2, and it's a point, so put it in those parentheses with the comma. Then we add the y's, 7 plus -2, and we divide that by 2. And then we just clean it up. So -1 plus -5 is a -6. -6 divided by -2 is -3. 7 plus -2 is 5. 5 divided by 2 is 2.5. So had I plotted these 2 points on the coordinate plane, the point that lands right in the middle is -3, 2.5. All right, so the next kind is, well, what if they give you a midpoint? Well, in class, what I did is I said, you guys, if I have to take 4 steps forward to get to the middle of your row, and so is sitting in the middle, how would I get, so this is an endpoint, this was LaRue starting, I walk to the middle, and how do I get to the back of the room? Well, if it takes me 4 steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 to get to the middle, it's going to take me 1, 2, 3, 4 to get to the back. So all I do is say, well, to get to the middle, I go forward 4. Then I go forward 4 more to get to the other side. And I think that's what you're going to want to do with these where they give you the midpoint. I'm going to tell you to walk to the midpoint. So I'm going to tell you to line these up. So I'm going to put 7, 3. That's one of my endpoints. It's where I'm starting. I'm going to walk to the middle. And then I'm going to continue walking in the same direction to get to the other side. So if I'm walking from 7 to 1, I'd have to go back 6 steps, which means I'm going to have to go back 6 more to get to the other endpoint. Now you can always check these. Remember, if I average these, I should get in the middle. 7 plus -5 is 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. So it works. So on this trip, I go 1 forward. So I put a +1 there. So I'm going to continue to walk 1 more forward till I get to 5. And I found the other endpoint. Now watch, that middle was 1, 4. So let's use our midpoint formula to see if we did that correctly. Our midpoint formula says that we add the x's, 7 plus -5 is 2, and divide by 2. We average the y's, or add them, 3 plus 5 is 8, and divide by 2. So see how when you're given a midpoint, you can get the other endpoint by just keep on walking. Let's go to the next one. So the next thing we're going to work with is the distance formula. It's a little more complicated, but I like formulas because they're kind of like recipes. They just tell me what to throw in, and as long as I have all the ingredients and I know where to put them, I'll bake up a perfect mathematical formula. You do not need to write that down, but our goal now isn't to figure out what's in the middle. That's the midpoint formula. Our goal is to figure out how long is it from one endpoint to the other, or what's the distance. So the distance formula, which I would write on a note card, I'd put NC for note card here, says that when you're given 2 points, and we're going to call them x1 and y1 again, and my second x and my second y. And in class, there were kids who represented this, and they were walking from one house to the other. The distance formula says that you subtract the x's. Sorry, this side of my board doesn't work very well. So you grab the second x and remove the first x, and you square it. Then you grab the second y, remove the first y, and you square it. That's the first part of my recipe. It says to put those 2 bowls together, then throw it in the oven and cook it up under a root. So let's go follow that recipe. It says the second x. The second x is 5. So all in the oven, in one bowl I have a 5. I'm supposed to subtract, so I'll subtract the first x, which is -1. I'm supposed to square that. Then I'm supposed to do y2, which is -1. So it's right here. I'm supposed to subtract y1, which is -3. I'm supposed to square it. I remember that when I subtract a negative, it's the same as adding. So that's really 5 plus 1, which is 6 that I need to square. -1, add the opposite, plus 3 is 2 that I need to square. 6 times 6 is 36. 2 times 2 is 4. On my calculator, I do the square root of 40, and we were told in class to round to the nearest tenth. So the distance between those 2 points would be 6.3. All right, so let's pull it all together here by finding the midpoint and the length of segment AB. Length also means the distance between the two, so those can be used interchangeably. You should pause this video and you go see if you can use the two formulas correctly. We have a formula for midpoint, and then we have a formula for the distance between 2 points. Let's say the distance from A to B equals. So pause the video and you go try it. Now that you're back, remember it's good to label these x1, y1 and x sub 2, y sub 2 because they are both in our formula. So for part A, finding the midpoint, let's go over here. I'm going to put it in this workspace. You can put it in here on yours. To find the midpoint, my formula says that I do x1 plus x2, or I add the x's, x, x. Then I divide it by 2. I average the x's. Then the formula says that I add the y's. So I'll do 4 plus -3, and I'll average them out. When I do my arithmetic, this is -1 over 2, and this is +1 over 2, and I have arrived at my midpoint. Hopefully you got that one right. The distance formula, I follow this guy, like a map. So the length of AB, which is written AB without a bar over it, is the square root of. Because there's a square root right here. Okay, so everything under a root, everything under a root. It says I take the second x, so I'm going to go over here and grab the second x, which is 2. I subtract the first x, which is -3i squared. Plus, I'm just following this recipe, second x minus first x squared, plus second y, -3, minus first y, and square it. 2 minus a -3 is the same as 2 plus 3, which is 5. -3 minus 4 is a -7. Now make sure you put that in parentheses, especially if you're using a calculator. All right, so 5 times 5 is 25. -7 times -7 is 49. I add those two up, and on my calculator, I need to take the square root of, I have 25 plus 49. It looks like the square root of 74. I don't remember what that was in class. It's 8 point something when we rounded it to the nearest tenths. So for today, you need to know how to do distance formula, how long is it, and midpoint formula. Get in the middle, but they're two formulas, and I definitely get them on the note card. Your assignment is Delta Math on distance and midpoint.